there, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Saturday and I have for you the video that I intended on having for you on Wednesday, and my week just kind of got away from me a little bit, and honestly, I wasn't really feeling super motivated. Kind of had a down in the dumps few days. I feel so much better, but I just needed some time, I think, to kind of regroup and refocus and get going again. So today I have the projects done that I had planned on having done on Wednesday. I think they all turned out wonderfully. I hope you guys like them too. And so without further ado, let's get to today's projects. You guys might remember this piece from a couple of thrift hauls ago. I really wasn't sure exactly what its use was. It seemed like an awfully big base for such a small little taper holder. And at that time, I told you I would probably be taking it apart, which I did. And so today I'm going to be working on the bigger portion, which is the base of the candle holder. And my first step here is giving it a little bit of sand, top and bottom. I'm going to be using what was the bottom as the top for this piece, and there were just some surface scratches I wanted to kind of get rid of. And then when I took the metal piece that was holding the little taper holder on the top, or at least what used to be the top, I gouged the wood a little bit. So I'm just trying to sand that smooth as well and give myself a good base for some paint. Once I had all the sanding dust removed, it was time to go in with my paint. And for this project, I chose DIY's Cottage color called Anvil. Anvil is a beautiful neutral. It's a black, but not quite a true black. It's more of a really, really dark charcoal color. And there's a couple reasons I chose to use the Cottage colors on this piece. The first being that transfers are a breeze to apply to this paint. It has a built-in sealer, so once it's done, it's nice and smooth, self-leveling, and the transfers just stick like a dream. The other reason is that it's very scratch resistant once it is cured, and I knew I wanted to add a cloche to the top of this, and I didn't want to take any chances of that cloche scratching off any of my paint. I did end up putting 2 coats of the Anvil paint on this, and once those were dry, it was time to choose my transfer. And I am going to go ahead with this transfer set called Sunflower Afternoon, and I chose this big sunflower to just put it straight down on the center of this riser. So I just peeled off that backing, laid it as close to center as I possibly could figure out, and then began applying it using the transfer stick. So I'm just rubbing that transfer stick over the vellum while I peel it back slowly but surely until all of my transfer is applied. Once I have the transfer completely applied, I went ahead and took my piece of vellum and burnished it in, just rubbing on it very well to make sure that I don't have any air bubbles or wrinkles in my transfer. Now, one thing to note about transfers is it's always a good idea to use some sort of top coat to protect them. You can use Big Top, you could use liquid patina, Sweet Pickins top coat, but in this case, I am choosing wax, and I'm going in with a coat of DIY's dark wax over the sunflower and the rest of this little base. And the reason I like the dark wax over the Anvil is I just feel like it really helps to darken and richen that Anvil color and give it just a little hint of a brownish tone, which I absolutely love. So I'm just brushing that wax on with a small brush and then using a dry shop towel to remove the excess wax. Luckily, I did manage to find a little cloche that fits over this almost perfectly. So once I'm done with this process, I'm just going to flip it on over and add my little glass cloche, and then this project is finished. My second project is this pair of taper holders that I picked up on the same junk run as I did my last project. And my first impulse with these, because I really didn't like the color combo on them, was to spray paint them a solid base coat, either brown or black or white. In the end, I decided to embrace the base coat color and just go over it with a complementary color, something that I could use in my fall displays and that would look good with the yellow. So I ended up choosing Summer Crush, which is this beautiful kind of burnt orange color from DIY. I love this paint color. To me, it's a great one for summer or for fall. And I am going over both of these pillar holders with 2 coats of this paint. Once my paint was completely dry, it was time to go in and do some distressing. I also wanted to smooth out my paint in some areas, so I'm using 220 grit sandpaper for this process rather than wet distressing them. And of course, it was a very, very windy day, and I ended up having to do this inside, which was not ideal. It made a mess all over my drop cloth on my table, but it is what it is. So I'm just sanding over all of the flat spaces and also this little round spindle with that 220 grit sandpaper to smooth everything out. And then I'm going back in and doing some distressing to bring out that yellow tone from underneath that orange paint. Once I'd smoothed everything out and was pretty happy with the amount of distressing I had, I went ahead and took these over to my sink and rinsed them off. You can see what a huge difference in the orange color you get when it's wet as opposed to when it's dry. And I did go ahead and take a damp shop towel and did just a little bit more wet distressing in a couple areas just to show off a little bit more of that yellow paint from underneath. The last step for these taper holders was to seal my paint. Since DIY paint is clay based, it does need some sort of sealer, and my go-to is almost always the DIY clear wax, at least to start, and these were no exception. So I'm starting off with a good even layer of their clear wax over both candlesticks, and I'm just wiping back the excess with a dry shop towel. And once I'm finished with this process on both of these, I did decide to go in with a little bit of dark wax to enhance some of the detail in these pieces. So I started by using a little artist brush just in the cracks and crevices in both of them and just kind of put a little dark wax in those areas first. And once I was happy with that and I had some shadowing down, I did go ahead and mix some of the dark wax with a little bit of mineral spirits to create more of a glaze, and I went over the bulk of the candlesticks with that. And so I'm just brushing that on. It's very liquidy, and once I've got it applied, then I'm just wiping back the excess again with a shop towel. The very last step was going over a few of those little shadowy areas with a touch more of that dark wax just to make sure it really stood out. And then these taper holders were finished. My third and final project for today is this wooden box that I found at Goodwill some time ago, and it has the word cookies pierced in a metal plate on the front of it, and I wanted to fill in that. I didn't really want this to have to be a cookies box, so I am using Bondo to do that, and I just mixed it up as per the directions, and I'm putting a thin coat of that over that entire front plate and just kind of pushing it down into those holes to fill them in. Once my Bondo had dried completely, which did not take long because it was really warm outside, I brought the box back inside so I didn't have to stand out in the heat and worked on sanding the front smooth. So I'm just using some 150 grit sandpaper and sanding that down by hand. It did take a little bit, but I eventually got it all smoothed out. Once I had the bulk of the excess Bondo sanded off, I grabbed some 220 grit sandpaper just to make sure everything was as smooth as I could possibly make it before wiping it down and beginning to paint. Now, part of the reason that I had filled in the holes on the front of this box is that I knew I wanted to use some decoupage paper there, and I'd already chosen the decoupage paper I wanted to use, and one of the colors in it was green. So I decided to paint the box a coordinating green, and I ended up picking Fancy Farmgirl by DIY, which is definitely one of my favorite of all the greens. I ended up going over the entire box and the lid with 2 coats of that Fancy Farmgirl paint. And once that was done and completely dry, I painted over that front metal panel with a coat of DIY's Cottage color called White Linen. I like to use white underneath my decoupage paper because it makes the images in the paper really stand out well. And I like the Cottage colors because they have a built-in sealer, so I don't have to worry about reactivating my paint with the decoupage medium and having any of that paint bleed up into my paper. Once I was finished painting my box and everything was completely dry, I took it outside to do some sanding and some distressing. So I'm starting here with some 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm going over all the flat surfaces to basically just smooth them out and remove any brushstroke marks. Once I had most of the box smooth, I grabbed some heavier duty sandpaper. This is 120 grit, and went over the edges and also the flat surfaces. I really wanted this box to have a very heavily distressed, kind of rustic look to it. So I'm trying to bring out some of that white paint from underneath the green and also some of the brown that's underneath the white. Once I had finished sanding the box, I brought it in and wiped it down really well with a damp shop towel, and then I went around and did some wet distressing. I like to do a little bit of wet distressing over sanded areas just because the sandpaper tends to leave scratches in the paint, and the wet distressing helps smooth those out and make the distress look a little bit more natural. The decoupage paper I'm using is called Botanical Masterboard. It's one by Roycycled Treasures. And since I wanted this to be kind of a fall looking box, I picked out an image that had more of a fall look to it to me. And I went ahead and cut out the entire image and then placed it in the front of the box. And then I used my fingernail to just score around the edge, so I had a good line that I could cut out. Once I had my image cut out, it was time to decoupage the front of my box. For my medium, I am going to be using DIY's clear liquid patina, and I'm just going to place a nice thin even coat of that patina in one strip about 1 inch wide along one side of the front of the box. Before laying down my paper, I spritzed it with a little bit of water from my mister bottle, and then I just made sure that that top line matched up with the line of the box really well before smoothing it out and applying another coat of that decoupage medium. Once I had that first starter strip applied, I went ahead and worked my way down the front of the box, just applying a little bit more of that decoupage medium and then smoothing the paper out over that with my brush and a little bit more of the decoupage medium until I had the entire piece of paper completely applied. Once the liquid patina was dry, all I had left to do was seal my paint. And you guessed it, for this I am using DIY's clear wax to start, just applying that everywhere with my soft bristle brush and then using a dry shop towel to wipe back the excess. I did go over the decoupage paper even though it's already sealed, mainly because I really just like the feel and finish of wax as opposed to most other things, and also because I knew I was going to be using a little bit of dark wax, and I just like having that clear wax down first as a buffer. Once I had sealed the entire box with a good even coat of the clear wax, it was time to move on to adding a little bit of dark wax. I am not going to be adding dark wax to the entire box. I just wanted to add a little bit of it in the details. So I grabbed a small artist brush and I'm just going into these little lines that are along the top and adding some there, and then adding some at the base of the box along the bottom for a touch of shadow and a little grungy effect. And then once I'm done with all of that, I moved on to adding a touch to just the very edges of the decoupage paper itself. I didn't want to cover the entire paper. I didn't want to darken the image at all. I just wanted to add kind of a frame around it along the edges and the sides. For a finishing touch on this box, I did add a new knob to the top from my stash, and then this little project is complete. I love how it all came together, and I hope you guys do too. Well, that is it from here for today, you guys. I hope you enjoyed my projects and I hope you liked today's video. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then of course, don't forget to drop a comment below and let me know what you thought of today's projects. Just a quick reminder too, the paint and products you see me use can be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. I carry DIY paint and products, which I do have a shipment coming, so I'll be restocking some of the things that are out of stock currently soon. And I also carry Sweet Pickins milk paint and products. The color of the month right now is Kent, and I am going to be ordering more. However, there seems to be a problem with the pigment for Kent, so it might not be until closer to the end of the month that I actually am able to have that in stock. But keep your eyes peeled, it should be coming. I also carry Roycycled Treasures decoupage papers, and of course, Redesign with Prima. And for Saturday's video, next Saturday, I will be showing you all of the brand new product that I just got in the mail from Redesign with Prima. It is called Whispers of Winter. There are some beautiful items in there. I can hardly wait to show them to you. So join me on next Saturday for that. Until then, on Wednesday, I already have a project finished for Wednesday's video and one on the way. So it will be a couple more thrift flips for you guys. So I hope you'll join me back here for that. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your weekend and beginning of the week. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate it, and I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.